Breaking news tonight. A stunning turn of events has sent shockwaves through the nation. What began as a quiet morning in Washington has erupted into one of the most dramatic political moments in recent history. Reports first surfaced just after dawn, and within hours the headlines were everywhere. Phones lit up, news alerts flooded social media, and conversations around the country shifted to one urgent question: what happens now? It started with a single statement, brief, almost cryptic, but its impact was immediate. Sources close to the situation say even senior officials were blindsided, scrambling to verify details as the story spread. In a city that thrives on secrecy and spin, this one felt different. It wasn't just another headline. It was a moment that seemed to rewrite the political script entirely. By mid-morning, crowds began forming outside major media centers. Cameras rolled nonstop, commentators speculated, and the nation's top networks went into continuous coverage. People at home, at work, in cafes, everyone wanted to know the same thing. Is this the moment that changes everything? Behind the scenes, tension was rising fast. Advisors were reportedly called into emergency meetings, while statements from key figures trickled out, each more cautious than the last. Analysts pointed to the timing, suggesting this revelation didn't come by accident. "There's strategy behind every move in this town," one insider noted, and this move caught even the strategists off guard. As more details emerged, the story took on a human dimension. Supporters felt stunned, betrayed, or defiant, depending on which side they stood. Opponents saw opportunity, but also risk, knowing the situation could spiral in unpredictable directions. Across social media, emotions ran high. Some called it justice, others called it chaos. Hashtags exploded, memes circulated, and EveTV, my platform, became a digital battleground of opinions and outrage. Meanwhile, the rest of the world watched closely. International leaders issued cautious statements, markets reacted nervously, and foreign media ran continuous coverage. What happens inside the United States often ripples far beyond its borders, and tonight that ripple is turning into a wave. Diplomats whispered about instability, investors adjusted portfolios, and ordinary people thousands of miles away wondered what this could mean for global alliances and trade. In the middle of it all, one thing is clear: something fundamental has shifted. Whether it's a single decision, a new revelation, or the sudden exposure of long-buried truths, this moment will be remembered as a turning point. Historians may one day look back at today and say this was when the tide began to turn, for better or worse. Still, amid the noise and speculation, uncertainty remains. Official investigations are likely to follow. Political figures are preparing their responses, and the public is left waiting, watching for the next headline, the next clue, the next confirmation of what really happened behind closed doors. Tonight, as the dust begins to settle, one fact remains undeniable. The shock that shook the nation has only just begun to unfold. What began as a single breaking alert may soon reshape the country's future in ways none of us can yet imagine. Stay tuned. This story is far from over. As the nation grapples with the shocking events of the past few days, new information is beginning to surface, pointing to something far deeper than anyone first imagined. What seemed like a sudden crisis may not have been sudden at all. Behind the chaos, investigators are now tracing a complex web of influence, strategy, and power, the hidden forces quietly shaping what the public sees as spontaneous outrage or political meltdown. In Washington, whispers are growing louder. Officials close to the situation describe late-night meetings, secret memos, and quiet alliances formed months before the story broke. Nothing about this, they say, was accidental. While the headlines focus on the visible fallout, the speeches, the protests, the divided opinions, the real story might be unfolding in the shadows, far from the cameras and microphones. It's the kind of behind-the-scenes maneuvering that has defined politics for generations, but this time, the stakes feel higher than ever. According to sources familiar with the ongoing investigation, key players inside and outside government had been moving in parallel, each with their own motives but seemingly converging toward a single moment of disruption. Some call it strategy, others call it sabotage. Either way, it's now clear that powerful interests, political, financial, and global, were positioning themselves long before the public had any idea what was coming. Experts say this isn't unusual in times of political turbulence. Whenever a system begins to shake, hidden hands often emerge. Lobbyists pushing quiet agendas, corporations guarding their influence, foreign actors testing boundaries. What's unusual, analysts suggest, is how synchronized this particular storm appears to be. It's as if multiple forces, each acting independently, collided at the perfect moment to create a wave that no one could control. For ordinary Americans watching from their living rooms, the details can feel distant and abstract, a story about powerful people in distant rooms. But the consequences are already rippling outward. Markets are unsteady. Policy talks have stalled. Communities divided by ideology now feel even further apart. And in the middle of it all, ordinary citizens are left to wonder who's really steering the ship and whether the leaders on television are the ones truly calling the shots. Around the world, foreign governments are watching closely, weighing how to respond. Some see opportunity, others see danger. Diplomats are quietly assessing whether this internal upheaval could shift alliances, disrupt trade, or weaken the nation's voice on the global stage. Behind closed doors, there's a growing sense that whatever happens next here will not stay here, that the ripple effects could reshape relationships and strategies across continents. Yet, amid the speculation and secrecy, one truth remains. Chaos doesn't come from nowhere. It's built, piece by piece, through quiet decisions, silent deals, and unseen intentions. What's happening now is not just about what we see on the surface, but about what's been building beneath it for years, in boardrooms, in back channels, and in the corridors of power. As the investigation deepens and new revelations emerge, the question becomes not just who's responsible for the chaos, but who stands to gain from it. Because in the end, every storm has architects, and tonight the nation is just beginning to discover who they are. Stay with us. This story and the forces behind it are only starting to come to light. What began as a single decision, a single statement, or perhaps even a single mistake, has now spiraled into a chain reaction, shaking the foundations of power and trust across the nation. Few could have predicted how fast events would unfold or how far the impact would reach. It started quietly, almost unnoticed, but within days, one action triggered another, and then another, until the momentum became unstoppable. What we're witnessing now is the domino effect no one saw coming. In the early hours of the week, political insiders dismissed it as routine, another flash of controversy in a climate already charged with division. But by midweek, it was clear this wasn't going away. Officials began to step back, allies grew silent, and even longtime supporters started to distance themselves. What had seemed like a momentary storm was turning into a full-blown reckoning, one that exposed fault lines not just in the halls of government, but in the very institutions meant to keep the system stable. Behind the scenes, the pressure was mounting. Advisors raced to contain the fallout, issuing carefully worded statements trying to steer the narrative before it slipped completely out of control. But the harder they tried to manage it, the more unpredictable it became. Each new revelation only fueled more questions, and each denial seemed to open a new door to speculation. It was like watching a line of dominoes tip over in slow motion, unstoppable, mesmerizing, and deeply unsettling. On the streets, the reaction was immediate. Across cities, people gathered in front of televisions, in cafes, on sidewalks, refreshing their phones by the minute. Some cheered what they saw as long overdue accountability. Others feared the collapse of something larger, something vital to national unity. The divide grew sharper. Families argued at dinner tables, commentators clashed on air, and social media turned into a battlefield of disbelief and outrage. Everyone could sense this was bigger than politics. It was about trust, leadership, and the fragile balance that holds the country together. Economists warned that instability breeds uncertainty, and uncertainty shakes markets, and they were right. By the next morning, stocks had dipped, investors were holding their breath, and international partners were demanding clarity. In Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East, allies called for reassurance, while adversaries watched closely, waiting for weakness. What started as an isolated event in Washington was now echoing across borders, testing not just the strength of a presidency, but the resilience of an entire nation's image abroad. Amid the chaos, one question lingered. How did no one see this coming? The truth, experts say, may lie in years of growing division. A political culture that ignored warning signs until they became too large to hide. The dominoes were always lined up. It just took one push to set them falling, and once they did, there was no stopping them. As investigations expand and statements continue to shift, one thing has become painfully clear. This is no longer about a single misstep. It's about what happens when systems built on power and perception begin to unravel all at once. Tonight, the nation watches as the final pieces continue to fall, each one landing harder than the last. This is the domino effect no one saw coming, and its impact is still unfolding. Stay tuned. A dramatic showdown is unfolding in the heart of power, one that could define not only the future of a presidency, but the very direction of the nation itself. What began as a series of conflicting claims and quiet investigations has now reached a critical moment, a moment where truth collides head-on with power. The stakes have never been higher, and tonight every statement, every leak, every silence seems to carry the weight of history. For weeks, tension had been building behind closed doors. Lawmakers whispered of new evidence, journalists hinted at major revelations, and the public waited for clarity in a sea of confusion. Then, suddenly, it happened. The release of documents, testimony, or data that changed everything. Within hours, it was all over the news. The truth, or at least a version of it, had finally broken through the cracks of secrecy. But with it came a wave of political shock and denial, as those in power moved quickly to defend, deflect, or discredit. What makes this moment so intense isn't just the facts themselves, but what they represent. It's a test of accountability, a test of whether those at the top are bound by the same rules as everyone else, or if power has the privilege to rewrite its own version of reality. Across the country, people are asking the same question. When truth and power clash, which one will prevail? In the Capitol, scenes of high drama are playing out almost hourly. Press conferences run late into the night, Lawyers and advisors huddle in private rooms, and reporters chase fragments of information through crowded hallways. Inside the walls of government, alliances are being tested. Some officials, once loyal, are beginning to distance themselves. Others double down, insisting that what we're witnessing is nothing more than political theater. The line between right and wrong, fact and fiction, grows thinner with each passing day. Outside those walls, the public is deeply divided. In coffee shops and online forums, people debate what's real and what's spin. Some see the exposure of truth as a long overdue reckoning, a necessary correction in a system that has gone unchecked for too long. Others view it as an orchestrated attack, a weaponization of justice for political gain. The clash of narratives has turned every conversation into a battleground of belief, every opinion a declaration of allegiance. Around the world, allies and rivals alike are watching closely. Diplomatic cables describe quiet concern in foreign capitals. Financial markets react nervously, sensing instability at the core of the world's largest democracy. The question isn't just what happens next in Washington. It's how this struggle between truth and power will echo across borders, influencing politics, economics, and trust in leadership worldwide. Still, amid the noise, one undeniable reality is emerging. Something fundamental is shifting, whether it's the exposure of long-guarded secrets or the misuse of authority to suppress them. This moment has peeled back the curtain on how power really works and what happens when it's challenged. As night falls over the Capitol, the tension remains thick. Tomorrow may bring new revelations, new defenses, new twists in a story that seems to redefine itself with every passing hour. But tonight, one thing is certain. The turning point has arrived. The battle between truth and power is no longer theoretical. It's happening right now in real time before the eyes of an anxious nation. Stay with us. This story is far from over. The fallout has begun, and the nation is on edge. What started as a political shockwave has now evolved into something much larger, a deep sense of uncertainty spreading through every level of society. From the halls of government to the streets of small towns, people are watching, waiting, and wondering what comes next. The atmosphere feels tense, almost fragile, as if the country is holding its breath, bracing for the next twist in a story that refuses to settle. In Washington, the mood is somber. Lawmakers who once spoke with confidence now measure every word. Committees are meeting behind closed doors. Staffers rush through corridors with stacks of documents, and reporters swarm every exit hoping for a comment that could explain what's really going on. The crisis that once felt confined to politics has spilled far beyond it, seeping into the country's collective consciousness. There's confusion, anger, and for many a quiet fear that the systems meant to keep order are struggling to hold. Across the nation, the divide is palpable. In some cities, crowds have gathered, chanting, demanding answers, calling for accountability. In others, there's silence, a silence heavy with disbelief and fatigue. Families are split over dinner conversations, friendships tested, and communities torn between loyalty and truth. The news cycles move fast, but the emotional toll lingers, and the sense of trust in leaders, in institutions, even in neighbors, feels more fragile than ever. Economically, the ripple effects are already visible. Markets react with caution as investors try to make sense of instability at the top. Businesses postpone deals, waiting to see where the political winds will blow. For the average American, it shows up in subtler ways, in anxious conversations at work, in hesitant consumer spending, in the quiet realization that national turmoil has a way of touching every household. What happens in Washington no longer feels distant. It's personal now. Globally, allies are expressing concern. Statements from European leaders urge restraint and transparency, while economic partners in Asia call for stability. International media outlets cover every development with urgency, portraying a superpower in disarray. Adversaries, meanwhile, are watching closely, studying weaknesses, testing limits, and gauging how far this internal tension might stretch. The world has seen political crises before, but rarely with this much visibility, this much emotion, and this much at stake. And yet, amid all the chaos, something deeper is taking shape, a reckoning. Citizens who once tuned out of politics are now paying attention. Communities are organizing, demanding clarity, demanding truth. People who never saw themselves as part of the process are finding their voices. It's messy, unpredictable, and often painful, but it's also proof that even in moments of crisis, democracy doesn't disappear. It reacts, it argues, it fights to redefine itself. Still, no one can say how this will end. Every hour brings new developments, new revelations, new questions that seem to raise even more doubt. The fallout isn't just political, it's psychological. It's about how much a country can endure before division turns into disconnection, and disconnection into distrust. Tonight, as the dust continues to settle, or refuses to, one truth stands out. The nation is watching itself in real time, uncertain of what tomorrow will bring. The fallout is spreading, the tension is real, and the road ahead remains unclear. But one thing is certain. America is at a crossroads, and the choices made in these next days will define its direction for years to come. Stay with us. The clock is ticking, and the nation stands at a critical crossroads. What began as a series of political tremors has now built up to this moment, the final countdown. The decisions made in the coming days will not only shape the future of one presidency, but could redefine what leadership, accountability, and democracy mean in America. For weeks, we've watched this story unfold, the revelations, the reactions, the rising tension. But tonight, the question isn't just about who wins or loses in Washington. It's about what this means for every one of us watching from home. The country feels restless. In major cities, the streets are filled with a strange mix of energy, part anticipation, part exhaustion. People gather around screens, refresh their news feeds, and debate every update like the outcome of a championship game. Some hope for closure, others brace for chaos, but everyone senses that we're nearing the end of something, or perhaps the beginning of something new. Inside the Capitol, the mood is electric. Advisors rush between offices, last-minute meetings stretch late into the night, and cameras wait outside every government building for the moment someone steps forward with answers. The sense of pressure is almost visible, the understanding that whatever happens next will be written into the history books. No one wants to be on the wrong side of it, yet no one is certain what the right side even is anymore. For everyday Americans, the weight of this moment feels personal. After years of division, economic uncertainty, and political fatigue, people are desperate for a sense of stability, a sign that the system still works, that truth still matters, and that leaders can still be held to account. Parents worry about what kind of world their children are growing up in. Workers wonder if promises made from podiums will ever reach their paychecks. Students watch as lessons from textbooks suddenly play out in real life, realizing that history isn't just something written, it's something lived. Beyond the borders of the United States, the world is watching just as closely. Allies look for reassurance that democracy here remains strong, while adversaries wait for any sign of weakness to exploit. In capitals from London to Tokyo, diplomats are on edge, quietly preparing for the ripple effects that could follow any major shift in America's political landscape. What happens here doesn't stay here, and that's what makes this countdown so consequential. Still, amid the noise and speculation, one truth cuts through. This moment isn't just about politics. It's about trust in leadership, in institutions, in ourselves as a nation. The countdown represents more than the ticking of time. It's a test of resilience, a measure of whether Americans can move forward united or remain trapped in cycles of conflict and suspicion. As the hours pass and the nation awaits the next announcement, one can't help but feel that something larger is unfolding. A story not just of one leader or one administration, but of a country confronting its own identity. The outcome may bring relief, anger, or disbelief, but it will surely bring change. Tonight, as we count down to the final moments of this unfolding chapter, one question echoes louder than ever. When the dust settles, what kind of nation will we choose to be? The answer, and what it means for us all, will define not just tomorrow's headlines, but the direction of the years ahead. Stay tuned.